How should you structure your training or weightlifting as an athlete, especially when you're almost always in season, busy, and want to be as effective as possible? It's not that complicated. I've watched several videos on YouTube trying to explain this already, and the fact as a coach, I was confused and annoyed by almost all the videos is the reason I'm making this one. There are 3 main steps to setting up training. First is pick the amount of days you can train. Pick out the lifts you'll be doing on each day and write up some type of rep and set scheme with progressions. I want to keep this as simple as possible. In the beginning, you want to pick out how many days you're going to train and which day specifically you're going to train on. This will be dependent on your sport, whether you're in season in the club or at school. It will affect your schedule and allow how many days you can actually get in the gym. In a very basic and general sense, to be as efficient and realistic, you'll want to train anywhere between 2 to 5 times per week. Mind you, I understand that's a pretty wide range, so for the sake of what will typically work for most athletes the best, we're going to go right in the middle and go with 3 days of training per week. 3 days allows for enough frequency and stimulus to actually see improvement and gains, but it also allows enough time for athletes to recover so they can perform well in their games throughout the season. Start there, and if your schedule changes, then add in another day, or if you just want to add in another day, do so. You just need to find the right range of what's going to work best for you. When you're out of season, you can definitely handle 5 days per week. The most important thing about the amount of days you're training is you need to stay relatively consistent. Training on the same days at the same time each week without roller coastering around, skipping days, or adding in too much random nonsense. Now for step 2, which lifts should you be doing on each day and how should you set up programming? I'm going to go over several templates here. Progression protocols and other options you can utilize. You can use them directly as I have them written, or I'm going to show how you can adjust them just in case you don't have the equipment, or maybe you don't know how to do something, or maybe you just don't like one of the lifts that I put on the list or in the program. That's okay. You can change it to something else, and I'll show you how you can do it. The reason I say that is because if you do so, more oftentimes than not, you enjoy lifting more, which means you'll be more consistent and put more effort into those lifts. With 3 days per week, you want to do full body lifts, and I have them structured this way. Each day has 2 to 3 upper body lifts, 2 lower body, and 1 direct core. And this is how you can break it up, and then I'll show some good examples. Also, it might get a little confusing, but I want to show the method behind it all. I promise it'll all come back around to simple screenshot and execute in a minute. The upper body lifts are broken up into 1 push, 1 pull, another just for fun and enjoying the gym. Each day, the push alternates from a horizontal push to a vertical with different lifts, and the same thing happens for the pulls. So a dumbbell bench is a horizontal push on day 1. Then day 2, it goes to an overhead press, which is a vertical push, and day 3, or the third day, is back to horizontal with a barbell bench. The same thing happens for the pulls for the most part. The lower body section has one movement that is bilateral, or simply put, you're targeting both legs at the same time, and the other that is unilateral, which is focusing on a single leg. You have your main lifts like a squat one day, then a hinging motion the other. Then all the unilateral movements are set up to go through different planes of motion, so you're kind of hitting everything. Then at the end, you add in your core. Hopefully I didn't get too technical there. You don't really need to understand that completely, but it helps out for those that are trying to set up their own program that might know a little bit more about lifting. Back to the simple stuff. Here's day 1. Dumbbell bench press, seated row, squat, lateral lunge, planks, and hammer curls. Day 2, dumbbell overhead press, lat pull down, deadlift, split squat, med ball throw, and a tricep extension. Day 3, barbell bench, dumbbell row, step ups, banded kicks, sit up to overhead press, and a lateral raise. As far as the structure of each one of those days, I have the 2 upper body lifts first, then the 2 lower body lifts, then the core, and at the end is kind of the fun upper body movement. You don't necessarily have to do it in that order. It's just the way I'm structuring it so that everything is visually seen easily here. That 3-day template, you could literally just use it. It's set up in the fashion that we just talked about and designed to hit all the basic movements and lifts for an athlete, all while not being too much so they can't handle it while they're in season. And there are tons of substitutions that anyone can change, certain lifts up or add in. The dumbbell overhead press, you could do standing or seated. You could do RDLs instead of deadlifts, lunges instead of split squats, and we could go on forever, but that's where it can get a little confusing, especially for new lifters. If you're someone watching this video and you don't know how to do one of those lifts or you have questions about certain lifts, then please comment and ask. The whole point of me making this video is to help out as best I can. I'm tired of seeing stuff made out to be so complicated or nonsensical that it's hard to even follow for someone that doesn't have years of experience, or that coach or whoever is riding the high horse on what is correct versus realistic in a world with a ton of variables. If you don't like those 3 days, here's 3 alternatives that you could directly mix and match with the other. I would just be sure to directly switch them across the board and how I have them displayed. You can switch out light color lifts on the same exact days. So for example, day 1 here, you could change the seated row out with a landmine row or a hammer curl for just regular curls. All right, so far we've set up the days and which lifts you're going to do on each one of those days and times. So now it's time for the final part. Set up the amount of sets and reps you're going to do for each lift with progressions by the week. I'm going to give two options, one more so for a beginner and one more for an intermediate to advanced lifter. They're both going to be over 6 weeks. Then after those 6 weeks, you can rinse and repeat or move on to the next one. Now, setting up the reps and set scheme is a little more challenging to generalize because ideally, progression-wise, each lift over time will vary. So for example, with a barbell bench or a squat, we want to get to some heavier sets, with the reps being anywhere between 3 and 5 per set. But you're not going to do a heavy set of curls for 3 to 5 reps. So we can't just make it a blanketed statement that this day you're going to do 4 sets of 5 on everything, which means you really have to look at it week by week for each individual lift. But don't worry, I've typed it out using the first program's template. You can screenshot these and have them ready to go week by week. The beginner program starts off with a classic 3x10 for most lifts, and then works its way up in sets, increasing the volume, and over time to heavier reps for the bigger lifts. Within this program, you'll want to try and gradually increase the weight for all lifts slowly and over time. If you're not able to hit the designated reps with a particular weight for right now, the weight is just too heavy. That's not saying you can't challenge yourself with heavier weights later on or in the later weeks of this program. But in the beginning, it's not so much about how much weight you're moving versus how well you're moving the weight and learning the movements. Then looking at the more advanced programming, you'll notice there are certain sections that have rep ranges. So for example, on week 3 here, it says 6 to 8 reps. That simply put should be ran like this. Your first set, automatically you need to be hitting 8 reps with a weight that is appropriate, but also slightly challenging. Then immediately go up if you can with keeping the proper technique. Set 2, your objective is to hit 8 again, but if you don't, stay with that weight. So if you hit 8, go up again. If you hit 7, stay. And if you hit 6, stay as well. Each set, you're shooting for the top end of the range and being sure to stay within it. On all these programs, always start off the first set with the weight that I've used before that's not the heaviest weight that you use in a previous week. If you're increasing the weight, perfect. If you're hitting the rep ranges, perfect. Challenging yourself, but making sure you're not going too heavy, and always realize if you go up in weight doesn't mean you can't come back down. One thing that's incredibly important with a program like this when you're in season is some days you're not going to feel as good as others. You need to respect that and pay attention to your body or listen to it. I want to make the simplest, straight to the point video on setting up programming for athletes. If you like the video or have any questions, please comment. Don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.